All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2016 College Students in Broadcasting Symposium. I'm one of your hosts, Dylan Kilkenny.
And I am Majestic Bellamy. So today in our panel, we have Gina Valeria, a full-time lecturer here at SF State in the Becca program, who emphasizes in radio and multimedia.
Our next guest is Joseph Jiha. He's an editor, reporter, and anchor for KLIV News in San Jose.
And we have Heather Peterson, a digital media journalist and digital news editor for iHeartMedia. And
our final panelist is a fellow Becca alumni. His name is Brian Newval. He hosts a podcast called 3 Dot on the internet. It's a podcast.
Automatic in iTunes.
Yes.
His other host, David, is sitting here in the audience.
Hi, Dave.
As well. Please clap for David and the rest of our panelists. So we're going to start off with a question for the entire panel, and whoever wants to answer first, jump into it. What is your position, and how did you find your job or career in the media industry?
Just go end to end.
Sure, okay. So hi, I'm Gina, and currently I teach here in the Becca department at SF State, and it's the greatest thing ever. I fell in love with teaching in a way I never thought I would. Prior to that, I was a broadcast and digital media journalist, most recently the acting news director at KGO Radio. I also worked at KCBS and KGO TV here in the city. I worked in LA, in Sacramento, et cetera, and I really just initially in college wanted to get into sports broadcasting, so I worked for the Raiders for a while, and that wasn't it. And then I went to a news station and said, I want to intern in the sports department, and they said, no, you'll just be logging tapes. We're going to put you on the investigative planning team. And so I fell in love with creating stories and producing segments, et cetera, and that was that. When I left Daily News, I went into nonprofit digital communications, and I helped nonprofits create nonpartisan digital newsrooms because of my work as a digital media producer. And then was offered the opportunity to teach here full time and jumped at it because teaching is so great. So that's my little journey.
Awesome. I'm Joseph Jiha. I work at KLIV News Radio in San Jose. It's an AM local news radio station focused on Silicon Valley issues. So mostly Santa Clara County, but it includes a lot of issues that hit the peninsula, San Mateo County, and things slightly touching the East Bay, like the tech sectors of Fremont and Milpitas, et cetera. I got that job by working in radio at Ohlone College in Fremont. They have a great radio broadcasting program. It's where I learned all of my radio skill for the most part. And then from there, I transferred to Cal State East Bay, also known as Cal State Hayward to anyone above the age of 35. And then from there, I fell in love with journalism. I took on as many assignments as I could working for the Pioneer newspaper, which is the school newspaper at Cal State East Bay. And from there, I moved my way up into that newspaper as the metro editor and photo coordinator. And as I fell more and more in love with journalism and storytelling and just kind of digging for details, I started asking. I was still doing one shift a week at KOHL Radio at Ohlone to keep my radio skills sharp. As a music DJ, that KOHL is much like 94.9 or 99.7. It's a CHR, Contemporary Hits Radio, top 40 stuff. And I was doing that shift once a week, but I talked to my program director there and asked him if I could start doing news on the radio as well. And we did have a News at Noon segment where you could do 5 minutes of headlines and the latest stories. So I started crafting those, and for about 5 weeks I did that, and all of a sudden a part-time news job opened up at KLIV, and my new passion of journalism and my lifetime passion of radio since college came together, and I went there and started busting my butt, and that's where I've been for several years now, doing local news. And then because it's a smaller station, I do a little bit of everything, a little bit of editing for some parts of my shifts for the other writers and the other anchors, a little bit of interviews on the phone and live reporting, and now also anchoring as well.
I'm Heather Peterson. Currently, I'm the digital news editor at KFBK and KSTE in Sacramento, which are iHeart news stations, the AMs, not the FMs. And I never really intended to get here, but I studied journalism in college. I really wanted to be a writer, specifically more like newspaper, print kind of stuff. But as I was telling them on the panel, my dad's in radio, and so just using connections that I had through him, I got internships in radio and started to fall more in love with it. So when I graduated college, just started applying everywhere and got a part-time position at KFBK, like I said, in Sacramento. And so I did a lot of reporting and anchoring, all that kind of stuff for a while. And then within the last year, I've taken this digital news editor position, which is basically I manage our website and do our social media accounts, and I even have my own little segment on the air for digital media. So it's very fun. Yeah.
My name is Brian Duval. From 3 Dot Podcast, one of 3 hosts. We are a comedy-based podcast show from Daly City, not too far from here. Around 2010, I went to Skyline College. I was a journalism and communications focus, and then transferring over to state, I saw the, as we call it, the beacons, all the students in Becca. I saw that group and I was like, wow, that's a really fun group. So I decided to become a Becca major, emphasized in production and social media. For 3 Dot, I can talk to Dave like right in front of me. Like, it wouldn't be, we call it as a job. It's more like a hobby that we just wanted to do for fun, especially with your best friends. It started out as a hobby, started recording, and then we started to see like a lot of attention, and we were like, whoa, maybe we have something here. So yeah, I think it's something that we do on the side just to record. Ends up being something, and so we started in October. We just started season 2 on Valentine's Day. So if you want to listen to our humor, we talk about everything, whether it's trending or whatever we can connect from our livelihood, from childhood memories to adulthood. We talk about all that.
Nice. Beckons are cool. We are cool.
They're awesome.
So the broadcast industry is known to be very competitive, so how do you distinguish yourself within it and become original? How did you guys do that?
I like the order we're going in.
Okay. How did I distinguish myself? For me, I don't consider myself a very creative person. I mean, if you give me a script, I can act on stage. If you give, I can write a story, but I can't write a creative story. So for me, I think I distinguished myself by working really hard. I'm generally a pretty nice person and very focused, and I get the job. I get done what I say I'm going to get done, and I think people appreciated that. And I was pretty tenacious. I always have been, and so stories. I was at KCAL in LA for my internship, and then got hired. So when they were trying to find someone to interview on a specific story, I wouldn't let it go until I'd found that person, and I was pretty much the only one in the newsroom doing it. There were a couple times when the reporter's like, well, we're gonna have to give it up, and I'd walk into the news director's office and be like, I got someone. And they're like, what? You what? And so then they were all excited. And this was before really the internet was so ubiquitous, and so it was calling and hustling and doing that. And so I think I distinguished myself just by working really hard and being very tenacious and going for what I wanted and really trying to achieve it. And then also taking opportunities. We all have ideas where we want to go, but there are always like many pathways in front of you. And so like working my pathways and figuring out, oh, this is a cool path, now I'm going to try that, and never being afraid to take a risk. So I think that's me.
I'll piggyback right off of that. I was going to say, absolutely, I agree 100%. Tenacity and just showing people that you're not afraid to take a little bit of an ego hit. I think if it means doing better work, taking extra time, doing more than required of you is something that you probably heard 1,800 times since being in college in your first semester, that it's a generally good quality. I was able to distinguish myself, I think, in terms of applying for jobs like KLIV and stuff like that with many forms of education. So along with that KOHL radio that I mentioned, where I'd done 3 to 4 years there, I went to Ohlone College for 2 years as a community college, but while I was there, I focused heavily in broadcasting. They didn't offer a broadcasting degree, an associate's degree, unless you wanted to do television as well. Since I didn't like television, I did 4 certificates of completion. Basically every radio thing they had, I did it. I did management, digital production, and in that class I learned how we started from the beginning of radio, where I worked with reel to reel. They've taught you guys that, where you actually have to cut tape and tape it together with clear tape and then keep rolling. That's how they used to edit radio. So I learned all those skills all the way up to like the current digital technologies. And from there, while I was with Ohlone and while I was going to Cal State East Bay, I was also interning at CBS Radio. I picked up an internship for the Sarah and Vinny morning show. That also came to me through Ohlone College because one intern who had been sent there before simply couldn't handle the hours. And one of my teachers at Ohlone came up to me and said, hey, can you get up at 3 in the morning? And I said, yeah, why? And he's like, okay, well, there's an internship for you if you want it. And I said, all right. He goes, just don't be late, okay? Because my last guy was late all the time and they fired him. And I'm like, they fired an intern? He's like, yeah. So I live in Fremont. So to get to the CBS radio's cluster stations in Fremont, I had to take the first BART train, which was a 4 a.m. BART train. And that almost made me late. That was the best I could do, and I was still almost late. I'd have to get off of BART and Embarcadero and then run through the empty streets of San Francisco with a backpack on, often in the rain. And then as soon as I got in and got settled, I'd be out doing a coffee run like 20 minutes later for the talent, right? So I did that, and I also did promotions for KCBS. After that internship was over, I actually got a paycheck, a small one albeit, but did promotions for KCBS Radio all throughout San Francisco. So every weekend, if you guys are cool and fun and you go out to the Jazz Festival or the Fillmore or whatever it might be, and there's all these street festivals that happen in San Francisco, I was there every weekend at 7 in the morning, setting up a tent, and then eating teriyaki chicken for lunch, and then pretty much spending my whole paycheck on that, and then going back home at like 8 p.m. sunburned and tired, and did it 2 days in a row every weekend. So I took multiple avenues, as she was talking about, into different areas of radio and different areas of things that I didn't even know I was interested in yet. And I took that, and that helps you form a nice resume. To say is I interacted with people on a promotional basis. I interacted with people like celebrities for the Sarah and Vinny thing, and I did that at 5 in the morning and tried to be professional while also being asleep. And then I also do news. And so I kind of have this well-rounded approach to life. And I put that into my resume. So the idea of not saying no to things unless you're absolutely sure it's not what you want to do, I think just kind of look at the possible benefits and then see if you can explore that. And if it turns out to not be what you want, you can, move that out of your life. But I did things that maybe didn't seem like the greatest, and then it ended up benefiting me in the end. I think that's how I got where I am.
It's funny, I did the same internship he's talking about, so this is bringing back a lot of memories. Running coffee runs at 5 in the morning.
Luckily, the Starbucks isn't that far away, but still.
But it's cold and early in the morning. I would say kind of a lot of what they said, just working your butt off all the time, just going above and beyond the call. Like for me, yes, I'm the digital news editor, but I have to be willing to jump in and help them on the air, printing out stories and just anywhere I'm needed. And I think that if you do that everywhere you go, it definitely distinguishes you as someone that they can rely on. And then also what you were saying about being well-rounded is, I just feel like you really need to know everything these days in journalism. You can't just know reporting or just know the internet side of things. You really need to know everything, every social media outlet that you have, and being able to utilize that, and every audio editing, video editing. You just need to know everything, basically. And it's a lot to expect of people, but I feel like when you have just a well-rounded background, people recognize that. And then the other thing I would just say distinguishes you is if you're able to reach large groups of people. In my job, you're praised if you can basically make a post go viral, and and news isn't always that way. I mean, if it's a slow news week and there's nothing major going on, you have to know how to market that story to reach a lot of people, and whether that's headline writing or just knowing which social media platforms to push that story out on. I just think, like I said, if you understand your tools, you're going to distinguish yourself a lot better that way.
I think for myself with 3 Dot, me and the guys, myself, Alex, and Dave, we knew that we were like, just doing it, like, let's put our voices out there. Let's just see what happens. There's thousands of podcasts out there, and we knew that, and we were just like, let's do it for fun. For any career that you choose, whether you are a Beckham major or whatever career you are picking, there's always the sight of the end game. And it's a good thing. It's also kind of a bad thing. You don't want to look ahead. Don't skip the steps. You kind of want to see what's in front of you and deal with it. Like, we knew that we were going to be a comedy show. We know there's thousands of different comedy shows. And then, on Podomatic, it's the channel that we distribute our show on, it shows us our rankings, and we started to see the number climbing from like 500 to 300, top 50, top 20, and we were like, whoa, what is going on here? Like, Alex was like, what do we have here? And I think what we came up to is that you have to be unique and be original and never unfilter yourself. If you filter yourself, you limit yourself. So talk about anything and everything, and be true to yourself, and connect to people. People like to listen to stories that you can connect with. So, we just roll with the punches, and so far it's been going real good. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, Brian, this question's directed at you, so it's kind of related to the previous question.
Okay.
In terms of staying grounded, I guess, and like you said, rolling with the punches, what other things do you think your time here at SF State prepared you for?
Being at State, I was part of KSFS Radio. I actually had Gina, she was one of my professors in one of those semesters. I was on KSFS, we did a show called The Cycle. That helped out, recording a show a week. And the thing about the Beckett department is we're all like very knit tight, close to each other. We support each other on the shows, we promote each other's shows. So I did that. And then I also did Under SF. Under SF was the production filmed in this studio. So I was an editor for that show as well. I think getting the experience from those two outlets kind of branched out to, going outside of college, whether you wanted to make it as a career or as a hobby. Definitely wanted to keep going with it, especially because Dave and Alex are like my best friends outside the show, and it really helps to have those two in the show and just, go off each other. Yeah.
Nice. So for Joseph, I have a question for you. And basically, how did you work your way up the ladder to KLIV? I know you explained it briefly in the previous question, but can you elaborate more on that too?
Yeah, I can go into a little more detail about that. I think what we've kind of touched on here, a common theme is I like what Brian was saying about, it's good to look ahead, but to focus on where you're at, to make sure that you are not skipping steps, I think is a great way to say it. I don't think I skipped a single step. I do, doing a panel like this is actually a great opportunity, and I do want to thank you guys for having us. That's great. But it's just, as a college student, not too far in my memory, I'd like to say, and a high school student way farther back, I'd like to think that I sat in these audiences before and I asked these questions of people, and sometimes I would see somebody who'd made it, and they talk about all these different steps they went through. Like, you just talking about how she went to 3 to 5 different cities, and I was just like, so that's the way. And then I hear another guy, that's the way. Okay, and so there is no one way, and I think we can all agree on that. There's no one way, and then there definitely shouldn't be a one way for you. I think you should, model it based on your interest and on the steps that look best to you. And so for me, at Ohlone, like I emphasized earlier, the thing for me was to say, if I don't want an AA in broadcasting, because I really just didn't seem to care about TV broadcasting, even though they had a great program there for that too, it just didn't hit me like that, like radio did. I just said, okay, I'm going to be in this room at this studio. There's a classroom right here, and there's a studio right here, and there's a production studio right here. And I spent, hours and hours every day there. And when I wasn't working an actual shift, I volunteered to voice track a shift for the overnights or to do one for the weekends or something. So I'd bust out an extra 8 hours of airtime in 2 hours in between classes if I could. So the idea being that I didn't say no to anything if it felt even remotely right to me. And I really think I wouldn't be as good as a news producer as I am today if I didn't learn all this great audio editing technique. Some of our technology at KLIV is a little outdated in terms of the quality of the phones sometimes, and often people are on cell phones nowadays. So in terms of audio recording for news broadcast on AM radio, it has to start really well if you want it to sound even pretty good when it gets into somebody's car. So a lot of things I learned at Ohlone in terms of technical soundness, in terms of learning everything about Adobe Audition after learning reel-to-reel, has really helped me. And it helps me with my personal journalistic endeavors when I do independent projects as well, or longer form pieces on KLIV. I'm mixing those. I'm recording the sound, I'm checking the levels, I'm engineering the entire thing all in one little microphone, another microphone, headphones, and then a camera around my neck too. And then I take all that back to the studio and have to collate that. So I think that's how I've shown my value everywhere I've gone, is that I'm willing to do, like Heather was saying, a little bit of everything and really learn as much as I can. And if I'm not confident in something, I'll tell somebody. But in terms of you need that story photographed, resized for the web, you need the audio to be clean, it can't be overdriven, it has to sound good, and it has to air later this afternoon, and you have to have cuts for tomorrow so we can rehash that story with a fresh sound. Okay, I'll handle that, and it's going to take me about 2 hours. And then I have to be reliable. So to make yourself reliable, to make yourself dependable for everyone around you. And I don't think I've let any of my employers down in a major way in recent memory because of that. I dedicate myself to making sure that if I say I'm going to do it, then I will do it.
Thank you. Gina, this question is for you. So you're a full-time lecturer here at San Francisco State, but what some of us in the audience might not know is that you have your own company, actually, Baleria Creative. So can you tell us a little bit about that, and maybe for those of us interested in running a media company someday, tell us a little bit about what that's like.
Absolutely. So I have a handful of really nice clients, and I help them with their digital media presence. And I decided to focus on sort of the nonprofit world or the educational world because I'm very mission driven, and so it made sense to sort of help those organizations out. I'm not necessarily a corporate client type of person. But I basically help them, I do everything. I help them set up their social media accounts. I help them figure out how to communicate, who their audience is, how often they want to communicate, how that's going to look inside their workplace. Nonprofits are traditionally or notoriously short-staffed and have few resources. So doing social media on a day-to-day basis can take a ton of time. So how does this happen for you? And we work that out and all the way up to helping them build their websites, helping them write the content for their websites, helping them with their talking points and all of that, and even helping them develop digital newsrooms if that's what they want to do. And so that's what I do with my clients. And then I also do a little video editing here, a little, I have a podcast for one client that I host. And so it's a lot of different things. And so that's my company. I wanted to say a couple things that I heard echoed. You all sort of know this, but I want to say it. You really do have to know how to do everything. When I first got into news, I was, a producer and then an assignment editor. But I went in and I learned how to do the editing, and I learned, splice and all of that. And I just learned everybody's role. I learned what the photogs go through in the field and how long it took them to do something and what the mechanisms were, because I never wanted someone to tell me that I didn't know where they were coming from. I wanted to make sure that whenever I asked someone, because I was in a position as an assignment editor, producer, where I was telling people what to do or asking people what to do, and I absolutely never wanted someone to come back at me and be like, you have no idea what I'm going through, you have no idea, because I did. And so that was really important to me to know. And also to be compassionate, hey, look, I know this is so, let's work this out. Now it was my choice to do that, but that's not a choice anymore. You've got to throw a camera around your neck and get out and grab visuals for your radio piece. It's good to know everything. And being in Becca, I imagine many of you are, you're really lucky in that you can touch everything. But if you walk out there and know a little bit of HTML and you have an internship and they're like, why isn't this working, or why can't I do something specific, you can hop in and put a little piece of very simple HTML code, and then you're their favorite, right? And then maybe you get hired. So, so knowing, solver, yeah, exactly, you solve their problem. And so I'm all about figure out how you can solve their problem. Know as much as you can know, and that helps me in my company because I've got such a breadth of stuff that I know how to do or that I'm willing to dig in and figure it out that I can really help my clients. And so that's great. I love doing that.
It's really cool. I think it's also important to know everything too. So that's good you say that. For Heather, hi.
Hi.
So you work for iHeartMedia, and pretty much iHeartMedia is like a really big corporation in radio. Everybody knows about it. Can you explain how you got to where you are in your position and what you do, more in depth and stuff like that?
Sure. So I kind of already told you guys that I did a lot of internships in radio with KCBS and with Sarah and Vinny, and I had a lot of experience from working at my radio station at my college as well. So basically after graduating, I was just looking for anything, any job that was available, applying for everything. And they had a part-time position open at iHeart in Sacramento, Clear Channel at the time. And so I applied for that, and you have to go through this extensive testing, writing tests and recording reports and stuff like that. And I think just having those internships really gave me a leg up because I'm pretty much one of the few people that was my age and a recent post-grad that was able to get that kind of position. The other people they were hiring had at least 5 years experience. So the internships really helped me there. But anyway, from being part-time and just, like I said, working my butt off, more opportunities have since opened up within the company. And I feel like it is the type of company that if you can get your foot in the door, they'll kind of help you into the position that fits you and your personality the best. So, yeah. Oh, I don't know if you asked me more what I do too, so I don't want to skip out on that part of the question. But yeah, so I do the website, which involves posting everyone's stories. So I work really closely with the reporters because they'll send in their broadcast version, which is very different than web writing. So I have to go AP style, go through everything and copy edit. Take their pictures that they've taken out in the field, resize them, just make the articles look really clean. And then I push them out on social media, so Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, anything like that. And that's pretty much the typical thing that I do. There's a couple other things on the side that I do. I help our anchors each have their own blog pages, so working on videos with them, and we might talk about it more later, but I do an on-air segment as well that just talks about stories that are trending on social media. I do that on the air, and like I said, just kind of filling in where necessary. So it's a lot of different facets for sure. Yeah.
So this next question is going to be for the whole panel, and I think we'll start with you, Brian. So what are the greatest challenges that you've faced so far in your career, and how did you overcome them?
The greatest challenge that we have overcome. Well, just trying to be different. Really trying to distribute your product or trying to sound different. Like myself and Dave and Alex, we are 3 different volumes. If you listen to our show, I bring in a certain character of comedy, and then Dave is kind of like the little silent one, but he brings some sort of comedy as well. And then Alex is a little bit of both of us together, but with a more professional manner, but he's probably the funniest. But I think it's just trying to not compare yourself so much to like everyone else that's out there competing. We don't really see it as a competition. This is something that we love doing for fun, and it ended up being something. We actually had a startup company that they started doing ads for us. We give them a shout out. We didn't expect that. So just being yourself, and like I said in the beginning of the shows, to kind of like don't unfilter yourself. Like don't filter yourself, because it limits to what you really want to do.
Want to go ahead?
Sure. Let's see, most difficult thing to overcome. I would kind of say the being unique angle is huge for my job as well. Like I was telling you before, with news, it's not always breaking. There's not always something super exciting going on. So still achieving your goals as far as bringing in people to your website or bringing in people to your station when there's nothing big going on can be a challenge sometimes. So it's about creating like unique content, both on the web and on the air. So finding those stories that no one's heard of, or that have like a unique angle or a touching emotional pull to it. Sometimes enterprising those types of stories can be difficult. And then another thing that's hard to overcome is just time management. You guys kind of talked about like you have a million things to do and you have like 2 hours to do it, and it just doesn't seem possible, but it always has to be done. So just figuring out how you can just achieve the unachievable on a daily basis. Because I don't know about you guys, but I always feel behind the curve as far as like there's just a million things that need to get done, and I'm one person, but you just like work hard and it's gonna get done. That's all you can do.
Yeah. I'll jump right off of where Heather left off there with the idea of it has to be done, and what we've been talking about, the common theme of knowing everything. I think it's important to recognize, as someone who's been in your seats before, that it's not fair. It's not fair for me or anyone to say that you should know all that. I think we'd all love to go back to the 60s or 70s and have specialization in your job and have something that you can focus on every day and be the best at it. Maybe that had its faults too, like people got lazy and comfortable, and maybe just kind of like phoned it in terms of journalism sometimes. But I'd like to say that you just have to see it as a challenge that you can overcome. I think it's a personal ego check, is to look at yourself and say, yeah, I'm well educated, and I go to SF State, and I pay my own bills, and I do all this stuff, so I am special and I am deserving. But no one cares about that. So you have to, like Gina said, make yourself absolutely valuable in the best way. And the way to do that is to make sure that you are selling yourself well. And the way to do that is to learn as much as you can and do as much as you can. I don't think there's anything wrong with always being uncomfortable in terms of, I'm not the best at this yet, but I will be. And so taking on new skills in the midst of your career, right? Like I've got a couple years in now, almost 4 years at KLIV, but every day I'm looking for something more to learn about, my own craft. And if I have a coworker who can help me with, learning a little bit more about HTML, which is one of my weaker spots, I'm asking about it. I want to know what I'm bad at. And I think you can really hone in on yourself and maybe get a really supportive friend to tell you honestly what's not good about your skill set, because then you can edit yourself and you can see, these are my strong suits, these are my weak suits, and here's how I can push myself out into the job world. So I think just focusing on what Heather said as the idea of it's a challenge that you have to overcome, that something has to be done. It's often going to be unreasonably large amount of work for you to do, and it's going to be difficult and might stretch your skill set. I think that's where a lot of us find an uncomfortable zone, is the idea of like, I'm really not good, and that's based in anxiety, right? You don't want to be bad at something, especially if your superiors ask you to create something. You don't want to be like, I can't, and also I'm not good at it. So you do need to stretch yourself sometimes, and when you do it, make sure you write down what you did, and that way you can sell yourself later on it.
Two quick things I want to touch on that you said. The idea of stretching yourself. I would say that I am never going to be the best at what I do. There's always something for me to improve on. I don't even want to ever be the best. I always want to know that I have stuff to learn. I always want to find wonder and fear and discomfort in something. I always want to push myself. The minute I'm like, this is good. Oh, I think I'll die. That would be terrible. But so that's one thing. And then you also touched on the network. Like when you hustle and do your thing, there are people there that are watching you. And so you also want to build those relationships and be thinking about that. And so every job I've gotten for the past, I don't know how long, has been because of a connection. I haven't in a while had to go out and beat the bushes and get a job. I've got connections who are like, hey, we need you to come here, or offering me, because I've got such a strong network and because I really try to cultivate that. So we can talk more about that if there's time. But the challenge question, quickly, a personal and a structural challenge. The personal challenge is I'm very mission driven, as I said, and so in my career, the times when I've made choices that were, quote, practical were disasters for me. Now, I'm not saying to go and follow your dreams to some crazy unrealistic way, but the minute I've been practical, I left this really good job thinking I was taking a practical job. It was a terrible fit. It was awful. And thank God for my network, I was able to work the phones and get to a different place. But for me, so knowing who you are, so I know I'm mission driven, and I know that if I don't listen to that in myself, it's going to be really bad for me. And so, but a personal challenge in my career was trying to figure that out and understanding what that meant and what choices are going to work. Now, I'm still very realistic and practical, and I take care of myself, but I think that the structural challenge for, I'm sure all of you on the panel can speak to this as well, is how news is evolving, especially commercial news or daily news. Sometimes the reasons I got into news to save the world and give people information that they can use and help people doesn't quite exist as often as I would like it to in daily news. And I think that's why I found myself moving toward the nonprofit world and the nonprofit news world, and eventually here to teaching, because I feel that I can do some good, that I can help, that I can offer something. And so it's very sad for me, and it continues to be a struggle to watch what's happening to daily news and to know that there are great people out there working to do great things, but that the forces that exist are there, and it's just the way it is. So
overwhelmingly there.
Yeah, it can overwhelm you.
That's good. So we know that radio is a very personal form of media. It's been kind of deemed as that. But we can also say that multimedia is kind of moving towards that realm, maybe in the social media aspect. But can you guys explain why radio over everything else? There's TV, and also explain why having a web presence online is so important nowadays.
Yeah, I'll jump out on that one. As a realist, I'll go out on a limb here. We could. What's today? Is it the 19th? 20th. The 20th. 20th. Mark it down that I said that radio will live for much longer than you expect it to. I don't think if any of your broadcasting teachers probably wouldn't say that to you necessarily, but if you've heard someone tell you and you respect their opinion, they might be right, that radio is going to die. I disagree, and the reason is because it is personal. And there's an older saying in radio, which is it's live, it's local, and what's the third one again?
Late breaking.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, there's another L in there, but live and local is the most important one. You'll hear KCBS has imaging, live and local, the news as it happens, okay? And that's beaten into you with a stick via the radio because it's important. I don't know if they need to go that far with it every day, but the idea is the reason that works is because it's the Twitter of the 1800s. It existed in that way because it matters to people what is happening around them all the time, and more so now today. And that's why Twitter is, whether or not it's struggling or not, that's why Twitter is successful, that's why Instagram is successful, and that's why Snapchat is successful. The ephemeralness of our lives is important to us, especially when it's going to affect us with death and destruction or extreme happiness, or like when the Fremont police rescue a baby horse, as you saw this last week. It's adorable, but it's only adorable now. No one's going to really care about the little baby horse next year unless it finds a forever home next year. So I think radio is in the car with you. And if radio turns into only internet radio, fine, but it's still radio. It's in the car with you, it's on your drive with you, and whether you're an entertainment radio person or a news radio person or a podcaster, the idea is that you are talking to one person. And I'm sure some of you have heard of you positioning. That's the most key thing in radio that I ever learned. And it works for radio, it works for conversational writing. If you're trying to take something, your latest post on Medium and you want to make it a little bit better, speak to the person, don't speak to them. I'm speaking to you right now. I'm speaking to you because I'm here to talk to you. So you should write like that if that's your goal, and you should write like that in radio and television in a conversational but professional style. And I think that's why radio will continue to exist and succeed if it's done well. Is the idea is no matter what it is, people want to know what's happening around them. They want it delivered to them in a convenient format, and they want to hear it from somebody that they trust. And so as long as those key tenets are being met, you have bad and good program directors and stuff like that, I think it will continue to exist, and that's what makes it so personal. And that's why I think Twitter is so successful. So for a radio station, it's important to just take your message and take your positioning, as it's called, straight to the internet. And so people like Heather are incredibly important, people who understand both sides of it, because if you can understand the journalistic aspect of it and what needs to be met journalistically to keep our integrity high and things like that, and to make sure we're not kind of baiting our audience with terrible clicks, but then also to make sure that we are engaging. So Twitter is a great medium for radio. I find that I've learned a lot from radio headline. Every headline that I write every day, I check 3 times before it goes on air, and I do that in about 2 minutes because it needs to be quick, but it can't be rambly. It has to be explanatory, but it has to be quick. So I take a lot of my headlines right from my stories, and I just rework them, and that can be perfect for Twitter. So if I think a story is that interesting, I've already fitted into 140 characters. So whether or not Twitter makes it 10,000, it doesn't matter. I'm still going to stick to the 140 because I've figured out how to do that so well. So I think that's why it will exist, and I think, at least for radio, social media goes hand in hand with the of the moment.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that because I feel like radio is the most personal medium we really have. Like you said, it's in our car with us, it's convenient, and I feel like I don't know if you want to say anchors or DJs or whatever, can interact with us in a more friendly, conversational way. It's just different than TV. TV, they're reading off a script, where radio feels, even if they are reading off a script as well, it just feels like they're your friend in the car with you. And I think online adds to that as well because it's not just, that hour that you're in the car on your commute. Like you can take it past that. You can take it out of the car. You can interact with your favorite DJs or anchors online as well. And that's what I experience a lot in my job, is working a lot with the talent and figuring out a way to represent their personality and who they are on the web, to just keep people feeling like, oh, that's my friend, and I hear them on the car on my way home today. And I look to them for my news because I trust them, and they're my, we have this relationship. We've been going back and forth, So it's just different. TV just feels more formal. You get them for an hour. You have to actually sit down to watch it. You can't be on the move. And I just feel like you said, radio and online really work hand in hand to bring you that personal feel.
Yeah, brings the relationship out.
Yeah. Do you want to go?
Yeah, I can go real quick. What everybody has been saying in this panel, the common theme is it's personal. Radio is really organic. It's one of the most lasting things, besides human interaction. And you can. It's like when we put out our show, we want you to feel like you are in the car with us, or wherever we're at, whatever we're talking about. We want to make you feel that you're with us. And with social media, it's forever developing. It'll advance. But for us, it's very old school, and you kind of want to bring some old school flavor to your game, and that's what we try to emphasize in our show.
Yeah, I will fourth that sentiment. Our colleague Jeff Jacoby, who many of you have had, talks about the fact that your lips to the mic are an inch, and then you might be right in my ear on an earbud, or you're on a speaker, but you're like an inch to a foot from someone's ear, talking into it, and it's hugely personal. Radio is also, podcasting is radio. Look at the Serial podcast. Many of you may be listening to that. This American Life. There are so many podcasts. It's radio. It's an audio medium online, and so radio will always be around. And people have been trying to kill it or say it's dying for decades. And what do we do? Even though I learned of Osama bin Laden's death, I think on Twitter, the first thing I did was turn on the radio to get more information, and to find out about it. And there's also a sentiment that we roll out of bed in the morning and we might grab our phone, but we turn on the radio because we want to know, did my world fall apart overnight? What do I need to wear? What's the weather? And am I going to be able to get to work on time? What's the traffic? Like we immediately care about those things. And so we turn on the radio, and while we get ourselves together in the morning, the radio is telling us, okay, world didn't fall apart. Okay, I got to wear this, and I'm going to be late for whatever it is. And so it's still such an important part of sort of helping us navigate our day. And I just want to quickly say, I was working at KCBS during 9/11, and that was one of those moments the only moment I think in my life where the world did fall apart that day. And first thing on my radio came on, and it was really early. It had just happened, and first thing I heard was, the World Trade Center towers have been hit by. And I'm like, where else in the world has a world? Wait, that's us. And then you jump up, and of course I was working in news, so I was the digital producer. I jumped online from home and started updating because people are going to look at it both ways. They're supplementing additional information online, hearing the radio, et cetera, and so really working that. But people flocked to the radios that day, and we would still do that today in a major catastrophe. And radio, taking away the podcast or the digital side, it's the only thing that's going to work in an earthquake or when the power goes out because it's batteries and transistors. So it's still actually quite a valuable thing, even if we lose digital. So.
No, I agree 100%. And I'd like to just add one last thing. I know I talked for extensive length. I'll keep this one short, but as a guy who comes from both sides of the world, I still love newspaper writing. I still read it. I still engage with it, and I'm still trying to write it. As an independent journalist, I do that occasionally. And as a radio guy, I understand the importance of brevity and, as we said, of the moment, right? But very often during my day, even if it's just a short drive or a short trip somewhere, if something is happening, I go to KCBS, I go to KLIV, I go to the radio station that I know is going to have the best coverage of that moment. And often it's right there. I believe the latest an SFPD officer got shot, or was it a CHP officer got shot in San Francisco. As soon as I saw that on Twitter, I turned on my radio. I saw it first on Twitter, but I knew KCBS would have it. And then the moment, I was just like 10 seconds too late. They had one of their correspondents just wrapping up their latest update, but of course now also, what's his name is headed out there. I can't think of the guy's name. He's also, and Jeff Bell's going to tell you that he's on his way, and so we'll have that update in 5 minutes. And if something's happening in San Jose, I know that if I'm not already there, Mike Colgan's going to be there, or one of my colleagues is going to be there, and I can turn on the radio and just wait 3 minutes, and I'll know exactly what's happening. So I think that is very important to say that sometimes radio can't be beat, even with Twitter, even with the fastest writers from the AP News just kicking out like the 2-sentence story about what Donald Trump said about the Pope. Sometimes things that break and happen locally, the best thing will always be radio. I feel that way. Thank you.
So we have one final question for you all. You've all given us a lot of really great information that I'm sure can be intimidating to some of the people here, but we all know what we're getting into as broadcasting people. So maybe just to elaborate or to remind the audience, what are some of the most rewarding things that you've experienced working in this industry?
So that intimidation is so rewarding. That's awesome. If you're afraid, and God, you're alive. That's awesome. Take that and push it and run with it. Like, I know we were all there. I was you. We were all you. You're going to be us. Like, that's great. So yeah, great. You're intimidated. You're frightened. You're scared. I love it. Just do it. The most rewarding moments for me, anytime I can get information to people that I think is worthwhile, anytime I feel that I've done some good. So I think 9/11 for me was a great example of I really felt that day that I was doing some good, that I was getting information out to people that they needed. And it was also the day I started to understand that I don't have to, that I need to be fair and that objectivity might not be a possibility because we were a lot of us were in the newsroom crying, openly sobbing. We felt it too, and yet we could still be fair-minded and as objective as possible, as that it was okay to feel it too, and that was a really rewarding moment for me. I think so for me, it's always about that. It's whenever I can get information to people. One digital newsroom, the biggest one, California Forward, their advocacy side was responsible for the redistricting and the top 2 primary that tried to help make California governance more fair. And so working on the nonpartisan side of that and trying to talk about governance and figure out how to make that more sexy or more interesting to people, that was extremely rewarding because it's such an important sort of foundational piece of our society. And also, a last bit is standing up to someone and knowing you're on solid ground. I think that we can all share stories of, your producer anchor, beat downs or battles, and if you know your stuff and you are on solid ground and you're truly listening, and you have to stand up to someone for your ethics or for whatever, that you can do it, and it's really satisfying when you are speaking from an ethical, educated, listening, fair-minded place, and you're able to stand up for yourself inside that really intense environment, which everyone in a newsroom is going to have that. It's going to happen to everybody. And to know that you somehow shifted the discourse inside your newsroom or helped make sure something happened ethically because you stood up for yourself, that's super rewarding as well.
I agree. I'm actually just going to pause for 1 second. I got really wrapped up in listening to Gina speak. Could you redo the question for me? That was incredible. I was raptured. So please go ahead.
It was amazing. But basically just talking about what moment, your proudest moment. There we go.
Okay, that's a great, thank you for twittering it for me. I have to go back to it. I absolutely have to go back to it. I've had a couple of big moments in my career recently that are they're nothing big for you all to know necessarily, it's not in the world yet, but one very recently, I just finally got a fellowship acceptance through USC's Annenberg School of Journalism, and thank you, and it's going to be cool, and I have no idea what that's going to be like. So talking about intimidation, I am so scared, and they know that, but I didn't tell them that in my cover letter. Okay, so I think the most rewarding moment for me recently in terms of my career is I did an independent news piece for KQED Radio. I'm sure you guys know KQED. They're the NPR affiliate here in San Francisco, and they're generally the most listened to NPR affiliate station in the country. San Francisco Bay Area is a generally liberal place, and public radio has a generally liberal feel to it. So it does well here. We're talking about 730 some odd thousand listeners a week, and it's a huge audience, and they're an engaged audience. What public radio does is incredible, and it's a great place to tell long-form stories. And I did a story related to the Oakland A's groundskeeper last year. It's a story that I wanted to do for 3 years. Tried to do it 2.5 years ago, it didn't work. And then I never let it go in my mind. And when the opportunity showed itself, and I'll save you the details of why the opportunity had to take 2.5 years, but when it showed itself, I pushed really hard and I went everywhere with it. As a freelance journalist, that's talk about intimidation. There is so little money for freelance journalists, or even just acceptance. I mean, you could even sell your stuff for free if you wanted it. It's very hard to get it in to an establishment media outlet. And I pushed. In the simplest word, I persevered. And the people who I knew vaguely at the Oakland A's front office and the media contacts there, and vaguely some people that I knew there, I almost broke my relationships with them to get that story done. I had to push and upset people, and I left people messages at 11 o'clock at night, probably further upsetting them. And then I worked with a great editor, so I had support, obviously, and I had a creative bouncing board to hear my thoughts and my concerns and stuff. But the bottom line is the story got done. It took me a month and a half of pure work. The actual interviewing and sound collecting and editing took about 4 days, but it took me the other 26 and a half to make sure that I had it, to make sure that I got what I needed. And it wouldn't have happened if I didn't say yes to myself at every single door. That's the story where, even though I wasn't dealing with Leland Yee type stuff where people are getting in trouble at the high levels of government for doing coke and having strippers and corruption and stuff where no one wants to talk. Everyone was okay to talk, sort of. But to get the story done, I had about 30 metaphorical doors slammed in my face, and I persevered through that. And I've never had a better metaphor for my life until that was done. And when it was done, I can look back on it with so much pride and so much happiness and say that path was necessary for me. And so I'd like to bring that full circle back to what we all said earlier, which is the idea that your path is going to be right for you, and you need to find that path by trying things. You've got to stop being afraid, and for me that's been a big problem when I was younger. It's just, where do I go? Paralyzation of choice, kind of like when you have like 30 toothpastes to choose from in the aisle. You may have heard about that in some of your studies, paralyzation of choice given to Americans. So just pick something and go for it. If it seems right to you, you have to go for it. And that's words that I can take in my own life every day. It's not just something I'm telling you. And the last thing I'd like to do is today when I was leaving my girlfriend's apartment, we've recently been to IKEA a couple times for some extra things, and I picked up the gravy packet that they sell. I don't know if you guys have ever been to IKEA, but they do Swedish meatballs and gravy as in their kitchens there. They'll sell it to you, but they'll also sell it in their freezer section. And the gravy comes in a little powder packet. Okay, so I'll try and make this quick because I know there's others. It's called grad sauce, right? I don't know how to pronounce Swedish words that well, but it's 1.3 ounces of powder. But in that 1.3 ounces of powder, I noticed this today, this is totally organic, but I had to tell you, there's 1,560 calories in 1.3 ounces of powder. That's less than the TSA lets you take on an airplane, and it's more than half your daily intake even if you work out, okay? So what we're talking about, I looked at the ingredients. I said, well, what is in there? How do you jam that much calories in there, have that many calories in there? So I wrote down right here earlier today before we started, what's your secret combination of ingredients? And I was like, I gotta bring this analogy in here. As soon as you put hot water in that gravy and stir it in a pot, it's 1,560 calories. So you are a packet of powder, and you are bursting with potential to make people fat with your talent. But you must add the hot water of perseverance, and I'd like to add a great cover letter and a copy-edited resume and cover letter. So find somebody who's a good writer and make sure that they don't make error, that you have no errors in your resume, or no one will let you in the building. And they'll laugh at you behind your back, which is a terrible feeling. So be the sauce. Okay, make people fat with the talents of everything that you have in your secret combination of milk, proteins, soys, and stuff like that. So, thank you guys.
Be the sauce.
Be the sauce.
Be the sauce.
For me, I think I experience proud moments almost on a daily basis. Maybe not as big as like a 9/11 kind of story, but if there's something that like affects a community, and when I get like listener comments on Facebook or something like, I'm so glad you guys brought us that story, or I didn't know that, I really needed to know, thank you. That's really rewarding for me, just knowing that we got something like that out there. You guys might not know this story, but it was about a year ago in the Sacramento area, 2 deputies were killed. And it was like we were running, kind of 24-hour coverage at the time, which is irregular for us. And just having that listener feedback of like thank you so much for being our community support, letting us know where the culprit was, what was going on at every moment, like that was invaluable to our listeners. And just like I said, the feedback was just really rewarding, knowing that you're doing good for your community. But another thing that's been rewarding for me is just kind of seeing how I've developed and kind of my final progress to this point. Like I said, I got into print journalism, and I just kind of ended up here doing radio and the social media stuff. And it's just cool to see all the skills that I've acquired up until this point, because I just never thought I would be here. And I kind of touched on this a little earlier, but now I'm doing my own on-air segment, and I kind of got to create it for myself, which was really fun. Because I was doing the reporting and anchoring and stuff, and then when I took this online media job, they felt like, well, you have all these skills, but now they're going to waste because you're not on the air. So let's keep you current and also talk about what you're doing now and what you're good at. And so it was kind of cool to be able to create my own kind of segment that I do every day now. That's just about like the intersection of social media and culture. So like I said, sometimes it's dumb stuff like Kanye asking Mark Zuckerberg for money on Twitter. Sometimes it's dumb like that, but other times, like with the Paris attacks, I did a story about how people are using a hashtag to find safe places. It's cool stuff like that I get to do. And like I said, I've gotten a lot of good feedback from that, and it's just been really cool to see. Like now I have web skills that I didn't have before, and I also have those on-air skills that I didn't have before, and I kind of get to like boast of all these new skills and all these finished products that I have saved for, future opportunities as well. So it's kind of fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you this mic, and if you can briefly just say.
There's been a lot of problem. We're really a baby podcast. We just started in October, And I think the amount of the reaction that we got since that amount of time is an amazing feeling. Like Heather was saying, you know, the comments that you get on Twitter, on your Instagram, what people want to hear you talk about, you would be amazed about the topics that we, you know, it's not the typical topics that we would get from trending. You know, we talk about how if you've ever been walked in, like someone walked into you while you were in the bathroom, or we talked about, we had a pet episode on how Dave's Chihuahua was abducted by a falcon. We can't prove that, but we spent a whole episode talking about that. And, you know, it's just an amazing feeling that people are able to relate to what you want to talk about. And if there's a tip that we've, you know, this whole panel has been giving out, Tim Grover, Michael Jordan's trainer, he says to, you know, get uncomfortable to be comfortable. There's going to be a lot of steps in the way. You know, some people after college, you'll land that full-time gig right after. Some people, it'll take more, like a longer process than that. But just know that the universe will work on its own and it'll get you there. So eventually you will get to where you want to work for.
Nice. Now we're going to segue into a part of our show where we're going to have students line up and you guys can ask the panelists some questions. So if anyone wants to volunteer.
Anyone wants to ask questions? You can line
There
up
you go.
over here. We're going to hand you this mic.
One over there, one here. 11
So my question is like for all of you, like through your past experience, have you had like feel like any discrimination like within your like gender, background, or even like your ethics, like working in whether the company you're right now or in the past?
Does anyone want to take it? I
Go
can
ahead, you
start.
take it.
Yeah,
and then
okay.
I'll-
I don't think I faced any harsh discrimination about my gender or race. That kind of comes with the territory of being accepted as a white person, even if I'm not. And so sometimes it's not really challenging for me in that way. Although I've had it with my class, I think. I work with homeless people a lot, not with them, but I've done stories on homeless people and of people of upper echelons and lower echelons. And so class can sometimes be a divider if you don't address it quickly and honestly. And so I pride myself on being able to connect with different people of different backgrounds, of different social classes. And so as a San Jose local station, I talk to the mayor, I talk to the governor sometimes, I talk to the lieutenant governor on the phone, in person, I've talked to, you know, athletes, but I've also talked to people who literally live in dirt right around the corner from my station. And as long as I'm honest and genuine, I feel like that overcomes a lot of those barriers, and to be upfront about it. And if you do feel that something is not right on the other end, and you are being 100% genuine, then you can address it. And whether you're a journalist or whether you're just there for, you know, like gathering sound or whatever it might be, if you're a tech person, the idea is to address it, I think. Don't let anything fester. But I've definitely faced a little discrimination within certain companies that I've worked with and certain people that I've worked with, which will remain nameless, about ethics, about a dedication to ethics. And sometimes in radio and sometimes even in print or through the web, there's not time for value on ethics and integrity, and I don't compromise on that. But some people will. And if you believe it's important, whatever it is, whether it's your rights as a certain class of person or a certain gender or a certain race, whatever, if you believe what you are standing up for in that moment is important, then like Gina said, just make sure you're right. You know, make sure you're right with yourself, and then tell the other person honestly, and tell the other group of people honestly. So for me, it's a dedication to ethics. It's to make sure that no one cuts corners when they're working with me or working on anything that'll have my name on it or my station on it. So I try to foster that. That's the only discrimination that I can really speak to, though.
Yeah. And I'd love to. I totally agree about the ethics thing, but you just can't let it happen. You have to, like I was just thinking, take up space. I don't know how many people play basketball or sports, but you know when you're playing defense, you take up space. And in the newsroom, I take up space. Like I don't allow it. And I don't think there's person-to-person discrimination so much as maybe structural in the larger choices that are made. So on a day-to-day basis, I think if anything's going to crop up, whether I notice it or not, I just don't allow it. You know, it's like, I'm here, I know what I'm doing, get out of my way, do what I say. You know, like, I won't, there's no room for it for me. And so I have never personally experienced discrimination. If anyone was trying to discriminate against me, I missed it because I was pushing my way through to do my thing. But I agree. I think in the ethical area, it can happen, and that's where you're going to have to more consciously fight for yourself or fight for the ethics. And I think structurally, like maybe we don't see what we need to see in a newsroom always, or maybe the story choices or the resources we're given. I think those are more of the ways we're going to see voices not heard rather than a person to person.
Yeah, the larger choices, like you said.
Great. Thank you. Great question.
Hi. Is it better? Yeah. All right. So ego is a big part of life, I guess, but more so in the broadcasting industry is what I've found. And we've all had those moments, or at least I think we have, where, for example, me, like I'm the intern, right? But I know that the talent, or, well, not the talent, but like the director or the producer is wrong in doing something. But you can't say that because you're the intern, which is really upsetting sometimes. So for everyone that deals with that kind of thing, the whole I've been doing this for 30 years and you're just an intern kind of thing, how can you deal with that in your guys' opinion?
That's a great question. You want to take that one, Gina?
Sure. I don't know if you got the younger people want to say something first, and then I'm happy to jump in. Well, okay. All right. So
I'll let you lead off on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that is absolutely a challenge. And I also would say, for the most part, people in the news, they've been where you are. You're going to be where they are. We all know that. And most people are pretty nice. But you do run across those ego. And I have an ego. I mean, I feel pretty confident in myself and what I do. But I try not to impose that on someone else. If someone's going to put me in my place, I deserve to be put in my place. And hopefully I recognize that. But it comes with learning how to communicate in a way that makes people feel safe and allowing them maybe to come up with it on their own, making suggestions. You may know they're wrong in your heart of hearts, but you're right. Saying it that way is not going to get you anywhere. So, hey, that's a cool choice. I was thinking, I saw, or I wonder, blah, 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 what about this? And they're going to say yes or no, and then you've done your job. You've put something out there. And they're going to take it or leave it. And you have to know that, even if you don't win that battle, you're going to get to a point where you're going to be able to make those decisions. And to also fight, even people who have an ego, they care about the product just as much as you, hopefully, I would say yes. There's one guy I worked with who was a big LA sports guy, and then he I worked in Palm Springs for a while, and he became the anchor. Man, that guy, it was so frustrating. He had an ego, he was annoying. But if there was breaking news and our reporter was out and our photog was somewhere else, he'd grab a camera and go out and get the story.
Nice.
Yeah, he was awesome. I mean, and he and I went toe-to-toe. When I was telling that story, I was thinking of him, but it's like we went toe-to-toe a few times, and it was, and he respected me for it. But because I knew where I stood. And so you're going to come across those people. You've got to learn how to deal with them, and you've got to learn how to say what you need to say in a way that maybe is safe for them to hear. And then you've got to move yourself to a position where you can make those decisions.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be said for, like you said in the very beginning, about compassion. I think one of the things that Gina touched on was accurate and amazing, is whether it's in your career or in your personal relationships, empathy will get you a lot if it's true, if it's genuine empathy. Try to see from the other person's perspective, but then don't lose your ground exactly. So in your perspective, if you're talking about like in the moment and he or she is like, no, and you're like, wait a minute. But that works. But yes, as an intern, you do have to kind of check your own ego, right? And then say, okay, well, make a suggestion in that moment. If you're not being heard, I actually like email. As someone who doesn't shy away from personal interaction ever, email can be a great way for you to really calm down, take your thoughts of when you think you've got righteous indignation and really compact it into like 3 sentences and say, hello, so-and-so, I really wanted to talk about this, this, and this because I felt like, well, this, and this happened. I really thought we could have gone with option B. Please let me know what you think about this. Thanks so much, John. Okay? And it's a really good way to concisely present your thoughts in a respectful manner. And if you're dismissed with no response, you can do a follow-up email. But you've done your job, and you've done something that hopefully can at least give you a little of solace, is the idea that I've stood up for what I believed in, and I've put it on paper, right? There's a paper trail, and if they respond, you can keep it. You can keep it and say, okay, now I know what his thoughts are on this. And trust me, I've had ethical dilemmas with my supervisors and subordinates and coworkers all the time, every day almost. And it's just something that you have to be diplomatic about.
Great, thank you. Are there any more questions for the panel? All right, I think that's going to be it for us today. Thank you all very much for coming, and thank you, Gina, Joe, Heather, and Brian, for coming out and speaking to the crowd for us.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Again, I am your host, Majestic Bellamy.
And I'm Dylan Kilkenny.
Thank you for.
We hope you learned something today. And for those of you graduating in the spring, we wish you the best of luck finding a job and the rest of your future endeavors.
Thanks, guys.